Hello, 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 beautiful people. You guys seen from the title, I am doing a pattern review and a sew along for this pattern, Simplicity 9739, which is the apron dress. So if that's some content that you would like to see, please continue to watch. Before we get started, let me tell you the Joann sale that's starting on the 13th. July 13th through July 15th, it is McCall's and Nomi pattern. So if you guys if you've been living underneath a rock and you don't know these sales, they're not posting sales every week. It's like every 2 weeks, like twice a month. And the sales are going to kind of like run simultaneously with each other. Where if you remember the weekend of the 4th, they had the Simplicity, Butterick, and Vogue. That's 3. And then they're doing McCall's and Nomi. So let me tell you, you're not going to be able to go every single week. It's like every other week for these patterns. And then sometimes it's every 3 weeks. So be on the lookout for, sale ads that you see. I post the sale ads normally on Instagram in my stories and sometimes on my feed. Sometimes I don't get it here on YouTube because I forget. So if you're not following me, go follow me on Instagram. Thank me later for all the content that I put in over there. All right, so let's go ahead and get in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video I'm going to give you a very quick pattern review and then off to the sew along for this pattern, Simplicity 9739. Now this pattern was a request line pattern. You guys requested it on the request line. And I don't know, since requested it, how many times I have had someone in the comment section for every single video that I post that's a sew along like, hey, would you do this pattern? Hey, would you do this pattern? Hey, would you do this pattern? Since it came out. Now this pattern just released early spring 2023. So it is a new pattern, but it is a vintage pattern. All right. Now, if you are new to the channel, hello, ciao, guten tag, aloha, hola, konnichiwa, wagwan, sambanani, salon, bonjour. If you're returning, you guys know if you are returning what to do. Quick snack, something to drink, come on back so we could get into it. Now, first, through the pattern review, guess what you get to do? Just grab you some snacks. I'm going to let you go to the concession stand for 30 seconds after this pattern review, and then you could go ahead and grab your coffee, your tea, your hot chocolate, whatever you want to drink, including the juices and milk and water. And then we're going to go ahead and get into the sew along. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this pattern review quickly. And I'm going to give my own details of this pattern review simply because, well, pattern description, simply because it's a lot. All right. So first things first, let's get into the pattern description. The pattern that I use is Simplicity 9739. Now, this is a super jiff back wrap dress pattern, and it's a jumper. So it's known as a simple to sew. So it's one main pattern piece, easy to cut, easy to sew. It's a 1970s vintage pattern. All right. Now, the thing about this pattern is it wraps in the back. It comes with ties that you tie at the end to crisscross in the front. And then it has the ties at the neck ties. That's what it is. And then it's an optional pocket that you can do in the front. Now, one thing that I will say that it does not have side seam pockets, but I'll talk about that here shortly, what you could do if you want some side seam pockets. All right. So that is the pattern description for this pattern. Let's go ahead and get into skill level. So the skill level for this pattern is rated as very easy. Do I feel that it's very easy? Absolutely. But there's some caveats to that, which I will talk about here in a moment. All right. Let's talk about the notions used. So if you haven't been following me, you guys need to go back to that Discover 50 beginner friendly patterns. That's no zippers, no buttons, no snaps, just elastic. And this pattern was featured in that video simply because there's no notions other than thread. No notions whatsoever. Get into this pattern because there's no notions. So that means just fabric and thread. All right. So there's no notions for this pattern, and you just basically need some seam binding if you are doing the bottom hem, but you could do what I did, serge it. Don't worry about that seam binding. Just serge it, press it up, stitch it in place. That's just a tip on how you can save you some coins, honey. All right. let's go ahead and get into fabric used. So the fabric used for this pattern, I used some scrap and card fabric from my stash. Listen, y'all, to be honest with you, the reason why I did that is because I didn't know if I was gonna really love the dress or hate the dress. And one thing I am not going to be doing this year is just sew stuff just because, all right? So I'm I was very on the fence on if I was gonna like it or not. I know Mimi G did this dress and she looked gorgeous in it. So I was like, let me test it out because I really wouldn't be making an apron in real life. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that I did that because I'm gonna talk about it in the likes and dislikes, why I have a love-hate relationship about this pattern, all right? So moving on, let's talk about the pattern pieces, all right? So for this pattern, it wasn't many pattern pieces. If I remember correctly, it's like 6 pattern pieces, 5 pattern pieces, something like that. But the pattern pieces you're gonna need is pattern piece number 1. It is a big piece. It is the front and the back. Pattern piece number 2, which is your pocket. Pattern piece number 3, which is your tie ends. Pattern piece number 4 is your front facing. Pattern piece number 5 is your back facing. And then pattern piece number 6 is your belt that goes around to create that crisscross effect in the front. Those are all the pattern pieces that you need in order to create this pattern. Let's go ahead and get into pattern sizing. So for this pattern, it comes in 1 envelope and the sizing is extra small to extra large. The size that I cut was a large. However, I feel like I should have cut the medium. But based off of the finished garment measurements on the pattern, the tissue paper, I should have cut the large based off bust measurement. But after I took those funny photos, honey, I think I should have cut the medium because it seemed like extra, I mean extra roomy and big. So I will not go in and fix it. I'm not gonna have all those problems, but I will use this in the house as an apron, okay? A wrap back apron, all right? But that's the pattern sizing for this pattern, and that is the size that I cut. Let's talk about modifications. Did I make any modifications to this dress? No, I did not, but I wish I did, all right? So let's talk about it, all right, shall we? So this pattern does not come with side seam pockets. Many of us like those side seam pockets to throw keys, phones, everything else into it. So I'm gonna put it like this. If you wanna make this modification and have side seam pockets, what you will do is on the side seams, right? Insert your pocket there. So at the sides, you know, where you put your belt loops, and I believe you have a dart right, yeah, there's a dart. You're going, underneath that dart, you're going to insert side seam pockets. I did not do it because I was doing the sew along and I wasn't trying to do any modifications to this one because I didn't know if I was gonna like it. So I didn't want to waste extra time to do that just in case I don't like it, all right? So, but that is one of the modifications that you can do. Also, for this right here, I feel like it would also be cute if you did the ties at the shoulders because some people don't like the back to show. I wore it backless. I should have put a shirt on underneath it, just, you know, my opinion, but I wanted to give that full effect so you can see what it's like without a shirt on. I was not gonna run back in the house and put on a shirt, go back outside in a hot heat at 7 o'clock in the morning and take some more photos. We wasn't about those problems. But one other modifications that I can see doing is the tie ends, make 2. So instead of making 2, make 4, and then just basically put one at the top right here and then one at the very back and then tie it at the top so you can have some tie at the shoulders instead of around your neck. You could do that as well. I think that would be cute as well. Let's see. That's the only other modification. Let's get into did it look like the photos or the drawing on the pattern envelope. Yes, it does. But we gonna talk about it. All right, we gonna talk about it. I feel like it does, but I think my photos could have looked better. But I think it was just the heat was going on. It was hot at 7 o'clock in the morning at 82 degrees in the morning. Woo, I'm still hot and I just took them just a few minutes ago. But yeah, that's what it is. Let's go ahead and talk about, are the instructions easy to follow? So yes, they are easy to follow. However, there's a portion in the instruction where it is off. And I actually filmed it and I'm gonna put it in right here so you're able to see that. All right, so I want to make a correction. So I sewn everything together. All right, so once you put it on, you'll notice that it is incorrect. So I want to make this correction of what I did. All right, so on number 17, where it says finishing, you're going to make a thread carrier on the right middle dart. All right, I did all of that between the large dot, and then you're going to slip the right belt through, opening in the left. So you're going to slip this belt into that. That is correct. But if you look right here where they have, I'm going to bring it up a little closer, where they have on the back, where they have the tie, that does not belong there. Okay, I'm going to say it again. That does not belong here. Look at the finishing. It needs to be on the side seam. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I took mine off and put it on the side seam. Now I'm looking at my dress. This is my pocket. This is the right side facing up. This is the pocket. Okay, now I'm going to look right here at this side seam. Okay, now this is when wearing it the left side. This is not where I have my belt carrier. Okay, so what I did is I unpicked it, and on this side right here you have a dot. Okay, you have a dot. Let me move my tie belt where it's going to go. All right, you have a dot here and here. You're going to stitch that tie belt right there where you have the dot. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it on a table so you could see it. Okay, my dot is right here, between right here and there. So I'm going to attach it just like this, but I'm going to make sure that the raw edge is facing the side seam or the center back. And I'm just going to make sure that I pin dot to dot. Okay, I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch it down right at the dot. All right, once I do that, I'm going to fold this back like this. Okay, and then I'm going to stitch it. Now, what I kind of prefer to do is I'm going to stitch it down right here and trim it down. Do not cut through your pad. You can do it like this to say, you know, you could fold it back right here to where it'll catch in, and then fold it over like that and make a top stitch. So I think what I'm going to do is repin and make a top stitch like this to where it's completely not raw at all, or you could kind of serge it first, sew right here, and then fold it back and give it another stitch. Okay, that's completely up to you. Once you do that, you can fix it and then you're all done. It should work out perfectly to where you could slip this back one right here through the loops, and this one will tie in the front. All right, I just wanted to make sure that you know that that needed to be corrected in the instructions because it's not right. All right. All right, so like you just seen from my clip, in step number 17, it is incorrect, and I showed you in that clip how I corrected it. Okay, so on step number 17, 17 and 18, when you do the finishing, so it wants you to attach the ties at the back. Okay, so if you look at number 14, where it tells you to turn belt sections, and then you're going to press, and then on the inside you're going to hand sew the belt sections to the back facing. You're going to do that on one side. All right, and then the other one you're going to attach to the front at the side seam where that dart is. All right, so if you look at number 14, And then look at number 18 in the instructions. You will see that one is attached to the side seam and then one is attached to the back. So the one that's attached to the back, you're going to bring that through that carrier. Now, I made belt loops. You will see that in the sew along. You're going to bring that through that carrier. And then the one on the other side, on your left side, when wearing it, you're going to attach it that way. Which brings me to another idea. So it wants you to attach it in the back right here. So what happens is, because it's incorrect in the instructions and you attach one to the side seam and one to the back and you bring it through the carrier or chain loop, whichever one you create, and tie it, I know you're wondering, like, so what happens at the back where it crossed, where you have the right side going to the back, there's no tie, and then it's just wrapped around. Here's the thing. What I would do is add a tie-in on the inside, on the left side, and then add one to the back. Okay, so instead of cutting two tie belts, well, I would make them smaller, or you could use some ribbon, all right? Attach one to the inside of the left side and then one to the back. Then that way you could kind of tighten it a little bit and tighten it in the back, you know, on that side, and then wrap it around and it'll fit perfectly. So I think that was another reason why I didn't really like that, because I felt like the inside of the dress was not as tight, and, you know, being a back wrap dress, you don't want your booty to be showing like that. You know, you don't want to have no photo mishaps, okay? So that's why I'm just giving you that, simply because that's one thing that I noticed after sewing everything together and putting it on, trying it on and everything. But yeah, that was that. Let's go ahead and get into likes and dislikes. The likes, I like the dress. I really do, but I would not wear it out and about. Not with this fabric, to be honest. I would wear it only in the house. Or if I'm going to the grocery store, because that pocket is great for the grocery store. I feel like this is a grocery store dress, or a dress that you would wear in the kitchen to cook on Thanksgiving or something like that. No offense whatsoever, but that's just my opinion. The dislikes, it's that back where you need to tie it on the inside to secure it just a little bit more. So I did not like that whatsoever. I feel that the finished garment measurements are off on the pattern instructions. Not the pattern instruction, the tissue paper, okay? So I am a woman with a bust of a 40.5, a waist of a 33, and a hip of a 45.5, right? So with those measurements, I'm going to say this. I cut the large based on the bust measurement, and it was too big, all right? So I should have cut a medium, simply because I wasn't wearing a bra with it. I wasn't wearing, you get what I'm saying. The waist, super big for a 41. I think that was just completely off. So it felt super big in the waist. So I didn't want to take it in and grade it down and all that good stuff. But the hips was spot on perfect for the size that I cut. So, you know, you would just have to make those adjustment, but I feel like this was more for an apron for someone in the kitchen versus an actual dress that you're going to wear outside. Just my opinion. All right, let's talk about first time experience. Did I have any first time experience? Yes. So the first time experience that I had was making an apron or an apron dress. Actually, I made an apron back in home ec when I was in 7th or 8th grade. I don't too much remember it, because I could tell you that it did not come out like an apron. I could definitely tell you that. But I feel like they need to bring home economics back to middle school. So my teachers, talk to your school district so we could get these middle schoolers some home economics. How to cook, how to clean, how to be productive, how to do their finances, how to write checks and balance sheets and statements and all that good stuff. They need to know these life skills, because these cell phones, these games, these Xbox, PlayStations, and you name it, Nintendo Switches and all of that stuff, and computer, you know, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. That's all that they want to do all day. Let's get back to social skills. Let's get back to those skills, those life skills, okay? So talk to your school district so they could bring home economics back to middle school. Thank you guys so much. All right, getting back into it. Would I sew this pattern again? Absolutely. Well, Yes and no. I'm not sure if I would actually sew this dress 100% again, but I could say I'll think about it. I'll think about sewing it again in a different fabric that's jazzy for outside of the house. All right. So let's talk about recommendation. Would I recommend this pattern to others? Yes, I'll recommend it to others. That's why I did a sew along. But you'll see from the sew along if it's something that you want to do or not. All right. I'm just giving my honest opinion. Let's talk about my pattern rating. Now, for my pattern rating, listen, you guys, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to rate this pattern a 3.5 out of 5. And the reason why is because I feel like the tissue paper is off on measurements. I even measured it and it was a little off when I measured it. So it was kind of like hard to determine, should I cut the medium? Should I cut the large? You know, it is what it is. But yeah, I'm going to rate this as a 3.5 out of 5. But for those of you who decided that you wanted me to do the sew along, I appreciate you guys. I'm giving you guys what you guys want. So no love lost whatsoever. I want everyone to at least try this and see if you like it, because maybe it's just a fabric. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Now that we did the pattern review, let's go ahead and get right on into the sew along. But before we do that, go ahead and go to the concession stand so you can refill your drink so you can get on over to the sew along. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go to the concession stand and then off to the sew along. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next sew along. This one is a request line sew along. What that means is basically many of you have put this pattern on my request line for me to do. I do have a request line where you can put patterns that you would like to see a sew along for, and I will do them as I have time and as long as there has not been a sew along that was already done for it. Now, this pattern is pretty much like an early spring 2023 pattern. So it kind of came out within the last 6 months. This is Simplicity 9739 for the sew along. It's a 1970s vintage pattern. It is a super jiffy pattern. The main pattern piece is just one main pattern piece. It's easy to sew, easy to cut. So I'm going to kind of, you know, show you the front and the back pattern piece, which is pattern piece number 1. And then we're going to get on into the sew along. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the tools and the supplies that you will need in order to construct this, what I'm calling apron dress. All right. So the tools and supplies that you will need in order to construct this apron dress. First things you need is, of course, pins. You will need the pins to pin your pattern pieces together, as well as your fabric. You'll also need some scissors, one for paper, one for fabric. I never mixed the two there. You will also need rotary cutters. I use one for paper, one for fabric. I never mixed the two there. I use a pencil and a pen just in case I have to make any type of adjustments. You will need a pencil and a pen. You'll also need a ruler, and the ruler is for you to mark your darts, because this apron dress has darts in it, so you need to mark all of your darts as well. After the ruler, you will need, of course, your pattern and your pattern instructions. You will also need some marking tools. I am using a disappearing ink marker as well as my white pencil. And this is basically to mark any dots as well. Now, some of the fabric that I'm using does have some spots of black in it, so I have to use my white disappearing pencil so I am able to see. All right. For this one, you will not need a calculator. I normally have a calculator when I'm making adjustments, but for this one, it's kind of like loose fitted, so you will not need the calculator. Now, this one, you do not need any notions other than seam binding or stretch lace. If you choose, it's optional. Now, it does say that you should be using some seam binding, but to each his own. If anything, you could dress view facing, but it does have a front and a back facing. I think for this one, if you are using seam binding, you would pretty much use seam binding as like ribbons. All right. So when I get to that part, I'll show you what I'm going to do for mine, because I'm not a big fan of seam binding or, what do you call it? Hem tape, not hem tape, but single fold bias tape, my bad. So yeah, those are all the tools and supplies that you will need in order to construct this dress. So let's go ahead and get over into pattern pieces and then pattern instructions. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this apron dress. So the first pattern piece is pattern piece number 2, which is your pocket. This is optional. Now, to be honest with you, I may and may not use the pockets, but I'm going to show you how to put it onto your dress. In this tutorial, I'm gonna sew it on. If I don't want it, I will take it off, all right? So you only need to cut one of the pockets. Now, for this sew along, I am doing view A, which is the shorter dress because I didn't have enough fabric from my stash. This is just some scrap fabric that I had in my stash from a previous project that I did. I had enough to do the sew along, so that's why I'm doing it, but I am going to actually wear this dress, all right? So I'm doing view A. This is the pocket for view A. You could also put the pocket on view B if you choose to do that as well. The construction is the exact same, so just go ahead and cut one of the fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 4, which is your front facing. You only need to cut one of fabric for pattern piece number 4, your front facing. And that's for both view A and view B. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5. This is your back facing. You need to cut 2 of fabric for both views A and view B. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 3, which is your tie ends for both views A and B. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is your tie belt, which is pattern piece number 6. You need to cut 2 of fabric for this one, for both view A and view B. And the last pattern piece that you will need is your main pattern piece, which is that one pattern piece that they're referring to on the pattern. Now, this is pattern piece number 1, which is your front and your back for your apron dress. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric. However, I lengthened my piece by 5 inches just on the fabric. I did not make an extension. I just took my measuring tape and measured down 5 inches. That's why it's going to be a little longer than the pattern piece. Now, a couple of things I want to mention. All right. So right here, you see where there's, I'm hoping you can see this. I'm going to zoom it in so you're able to see this right now. So right here, you have your bust line, right? Because this is one of the things I always get asked. You have your bust line. So you have a medium at 38, a large at 42, and an extra large at 46. All right. Now, I cut out a large for my bust measurement. Now, because I may and may not wear a bra with it, it would fit perfectly fine at a 42 or a 43. So I'm cutting a large based off of my bust. Now, when I go down to the waistline, which is this one right here, I'm bringing it closer so you can see. All right. So this is my waistline. For a medium, it's 37.5. A large is a 41.5, and an extra large is a 45.5. Now, here's the thing. My waist is a 32. Okay. So a medium is too big, a large is too big, an extra large is too big. But here's the thing with the waist. Okay. I'm not caring about it being the large being a 41.5 simply because it has ties and I could tie it to snatch in the waist. All right. So that's why I say for this pattern, you want to cut according to your bust measurements. Now, the last thing you want to look at is your hips, which is this line right here. It says for a medium, it's a 45, a large is a 49, and an extra large is a 53. My hips is a 45.5. So a medium would work if I wanted to do all that, you know, sizing up. I didn't want to do that. So I just cut a large, which is a 49, and I'm going to have a little bit of room because I like to have a little bit of room in the hip area. So when I sit down, I'm not popping any seams. Okay. So I showed you those little circles that you have at the bust, the waist, and the hips. Now let's talk about these darts because I think this is why you guys wanted me to do this sew along. All right. Now, if you look at this pattern, you have darts that comes all the way down here. You're going to sew the darts like you normally sew darts. You're going to pin them out And so from the widest part of the dart all the way down to where it ends. That's it. I'll show you how to do one of them here shortly. All right. So that's all the pattern pieces that you need. I'm going to back up just one piece because I did make belt loops. Okay. And I'm going to bring it up so you can see it. Now, for my belt loop, you're only going to cut one of fabric, and you're going to make a piece that's 6 inches long by 1.5 inch wide. All right. So across 6 inches, up and down 1.5, and just make a box. Now, if you want to do a thread carrier, you can. I don't like those, so that's why I made my own belt loop. So I just used this pattern piece that I created a very long time ago for all belt loops or carriers that I want on any dress, pants, whatever. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I did. Now, I'm going to back up just 1 second to pattern piece number 6. A couple of things I want you to take note of is the seam allowance. So on pattern piece number 6, it says the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do not sew 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? Because it's going to be wrong and it's going to be too small, all right? Also, there's another pattern piece that is pattern piece number 3, which is your tie ends. Also, same thing. The seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So make sure you are sewing at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance instead of 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for those pattern pieces. Everything else is 5/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for pattern piece number 4, 2, and 5, and also pattern piece number 1. All right. So that's all the pattern pieces you need in order to construct this dress. Let's go ahead and get into the pattern instruction. All right, so for the pattern instructions, I already talked about the pattern pieces, your cutting layout. The only thing that you need to do, and this is for pretty much all sizes. I am using 45-inch fabric, so what I did was I turned my pattern piece with the wrong side of the pattern piece on the fabric, right sides together for the fabric, and I made sure that the wrong side of my pattern piece was facing up on my fabric, okay? And then cut around, and all the rest of them you're gonna cut out normal. So take note of the crosswise fold, you know, so basically you're gonna have salvage at the top, salvage at the bottom, your fold line, okay? So, and then cut that way, all right? Now, I'm not gonna go into complete details on these pattern instructions because we're gonna be doing a sew along. But first of all, I'm just gonna kind of like walk you through what I'll be doing. So this one has the unit. So back in the days, they used to call it units, like steps. Those are steps. So unit 1, we're gonna be constructing the front and the back. What we will be doing are the darts. So step 1, 2, and 3, we will construct the darts. Then in unit number 2, we'll be constructing the pocket. Unit 3, we will go ahead and do the tie ends, or the straps, the ties. Unit 4, we'll construct the front and back facing, and we'll attach it in step 11 and 12, okay? And work on the center back. And then in unit 5, we'll be constructing the tie ends or the tie belt. We'll go ahead and attach that to our dress or apron dress. We'll go ahead and do some top stitching after hemming it in 15. We'll do the top stitching in 16, and then we'll go ahead and finish in 17 and 18. Now I want to go back to number 15 where you hem. This is where it talks about your seam binding, which you will be putting on the hemline. Now you can do what I do in serge, but for this one I may go ahead and do make some single fold bias tape and do some seam hemming, okay? Because I do have a little bit of scraps left for that, all right? Just to use up the rest of it. But that's all for the pattern instructions. Let's go ahead and get into the sewing. All right, so grab pattern piece number 1 and grab your pins. Now I'm gonna remove my pattern piece to kind of walk you through a little bit of how we're gonna pin out these darts, okay? Now don't be scared. Now, I'm going to open my fabric out to where the darts is towards me, okay? So, I'm going to turn it to where I'm able to work. Now, the darts is up towards my left. The bottom portion of my dress is down towards the right, all right? Now, if you could see this, you probably can't see it really good in the camera, but this is one of my darts, okay, where you see the yellow. I wish I could show you this a little better, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it and I'm going to pin out my dart. I'm just gonna show you on one and you're gonna do the other ones yourself. So you're gonna go at that dot, you're gonna look at the back, make sure that you are pinning out your dart. We have done darts so many times on this channel, I'm not gonna walk you through every last dart, all right? Then I'm gonna take it, make sure that I'm pinning on the line where the yellow is, look behind, make sure that it's matching up, and then I'm going to pin again. And I'm just gonna pin all of my darts. So go ahead and pin all of your darts now. All right, so now that I have the first dart pin, I'm gonna start at the beginning using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning, sew along this dart line. Let me try to show you a little bit better, okay? That yellow line right here. So I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning, sew all the way down until I get to that dot right here at the end of my dart. It's a long dart, so don't get scared to do this, okay? So as soon as I get to where my pin is for that dot, I'm not going to back stitch. I'm just gonna pull up my thread and tie it 2 or 3 times to complete my dart, all right? So do that for all of your darts now. All right, so now I'm gonna show you how to do one dart, and you could do the other darts by yourself, but because I know most of you are scared to do these darts, but it's nothing to it, so I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna move my speed for my sewing machine down so it's going a little bit slower. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to go ahead and put my presser foot down. I'm gonna back stitch. And then I'm gonna sew on the line. That yellow line that you are seeing right here, I'm just following and sewing that line. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew all the way to the end where I have my pin at. So I'm starting to get to where that pin is right there. I'm going really, really slow not to pass up that dot. Now that I'm at the dot now, what I'm gonna do is lift up my needle, lift up my presser foot, and I'm just gonna pull some thread, just enough to tie. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to tie it like 2 or 3 times. Just take your thread, tie it 2 or 3 times. All right, so now that I tied it 2 or 3 times, just cut your thread and then press your darts down. All right, so that's all you do. Just go ahead and do the rest of your darts just like we did for this one. All right, so now that I have all of my darts done in the dress portion or the front and the back portion of your apron dress, you're going to move this out of the way. But before we do so, I want to tell you to grab your pattern piece because I'm pretty sure many of you forgot to do this, but you want to mark where you are putting your pocket. So grab your pattern piece real quick. And if you want the pocket in the front, I'm going to call it the kangaroo pocket, what you need to do is match up your ends, match up your center front where you have that fold, and then grab your pattern piece and you're going to make sure that you line it up at the top and all the way down to the hem. And you're just gonna basically mark, I just put like a little dot there, and whatever size you made is where you're gonna make your placement. So this line right here is for medium, large, extra large, okay? So I made a dot right here to symbolize the center. I made a dot at the bottom of that large line and a dot at the top of the large line. So when I turn it right side out, I know where my dots are, okay? So if you did not mark your placement for your pocket, go ahead and do so now. All right, after you make your placement for your pockets, go ahead and move your apron dress, the base of your dress. Move it off to the side and grab pattern piece number 2, your pockets. Now we are on unit 2 if you are looking at the instructions, okay? So the first thing, you guys should know how to do these pocket situation right now, but this is the right side of my fabric, okay? I marked the number 2 on the back to symbolize the wrong side of my fabric already, all right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, I went ahead and searched the top portion. I also made a little clip on the side where my fold line is, and all I'm going to do is fold the top portion down to that clipping, my fold line, and I'm going to pin on both sides. And then I'm going to go to the sewing machine using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to stitch it down, come all the way down, go across and back up to make that box. All right. So go ahead and do that now. All right. So now that I have my pocket sewn all the way down and at the bottom, what I'm going to do is clip just a little bit to kind of trim down this so-called facing, self-facing, I guess you could call it. I'm going to do it on the other side. I'm just going to come in just a tad bit, not all the way to the stitching, but just a little bit, and trim off just a little bit, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it right side out. Just make sure you clip all the loose threads as well. And I'm going to turn my pocket right side out. If you need to, grab your point turner. So I'm going to grab my point turner. I'm going to poke out my corners to get a nice clean finish. Then I'm going to go to the ironing board, and I'm going to just press the pocket into place. All right. So go ahead and press up your pocket now. All right. So now that I have my pocket pressed, I went ahead and stitch about 1/4 of an inch from the edge all the way across right here at the upper portion of my pocket. It's to make sure that this portion right here on the inside stays down. All right, so that's what it looks like on the inside, and this is what it looks like on the outside that you're going to be able to see. Now go ahead and grab the main portion of your dress, open it out with the right side facing up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pin my pocket onto my dress. Now, one thing I'm hoping you're able to see this is I have pins where my dots are. So I have dots right here, a dot in the center, and then 2 dots right here, okay? I'm hoping you're able to see that really good, but just match up those 2 dots at the top in between those 2 notches. I'm sorry, those 2 dots. So I'm gonna match up right here, and I'm going to pin. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to match up the dots at the bottom, the corners and the dots at the bottom as well, and then I'm going to pin. So just pin your pocket onto the front portion of your dress now. All right, so now that I have my pocket pinned onto my dress, I'm gonna sew close to the edge. So I'm gonna do 2 stitching. I'm gonna do the first one at 5/8 of an inch all the way around, and then I'm gonna do a second one at about 3/8 of an inch all the way around. So I'm gonna have 2 rows of stitching on my pocket because I wanna just give it a little bit more detail. But if you don't wanna do that and you just wanna do sew close to the edge, you can do that as well. So go ahead and stitch your pocket down. You're just going to be sewing both sides and the bottom. Do not sew the top. All right, so go ahead and sew on your pocket to your dress now. All right, so now that I have the pocket sewn on, I did 5/8 on the first inner stitching and then 3/8 on the outer stitching. So you'll see 2 lines. I hope you can see that on mine. All right, so go ahead and move your dress out of the way just real quick. Grab pattern piece number 3, which is your tie ends. And one thing I want to mention about this, like I said when I showed the pattern pieces, the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance when you sew this together. All right, now what you're going to do is with right sides together. So this is the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, and I'm going to put right sides together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the seam, the raw edges together. All right, so pin your tie ends right sides together now. And so I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to pin. Go ahead and pin your tie ends now. All right, so now that I have my tie ends pinned together, now this is the portion where my dots are. You can see that, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it this way at the sewing machine, and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning. I'm not gonna sew this in where the dots are, okay? I'm just gonna back stitch at the beginning, so all the way down this long edge, pivot when I get about within 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then finish off this shorter end, all right? Once I do that, I'm gonna trim it down, trim the corners. Do not clip your stitching through your stitching. I'm gonna trim it all the way down and then turn it right side out and give it a good press, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the tie ends done, I think these are the tie ends done. The next thing you want to do is grab your dress, and we're going to baste our tie ends onto our dress. So open out your dress to the right side, facing up. All right, so what you're going to do is you're looking for your pocket, and what you're going to do is you're going to pin on your ties. Now make sure that you are looking at where you have your straps at, okay? So you should have a dot here, and you should have a dot here, and you have your pocket right here. So you should have your pocket. So go up from your pocket, and you should have 2 dots. If you did not mark this dot area, then you need to go back to your pattern piece and mark it, all right? So what you're going to do is you're going to pin. Now listen, I pressed it to where you have that seam line. I want to make sure that that's up. So when I turn it, it looks really nice on the right side. So I'm going to make sure that my dots are meeting up and the raw edges are even, and I'm going to pin at the top on both of my tie ends. All right, so go ahead and pin both of your ties to the top of your dress now. All right, so now that I have my tie ends pinned to my dress, I'm just gonna go ahead and baste across the top of my ties. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my straps basted on, if you're wondering how did I baste it on, I basted it on using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. It avoids me having to pick it out when I'm done and have to stitch the facing on, all right? So now move your dress off to the side real quick, and we're gonna grab our front and back facing, which are pattern piece number 4 and 5. So grab pattern piece 4 and 5 now. All right, so one thing I will say about this dress is you will notice that you do not need any interfacing. So if you want to interface your front and back pattern piece, that's completely up to you if you want to give it more structure. But for me, I don't want to do that, and it doesn't require that, all right? So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 4. And then what you want to do now, this is the right side of mine. I completely marked the wrong side with a number 4. But what you want to do is you want to do right sides together. So this is the wrong side of my pattern piece number 5. I'm going to pin right sides together, and make sure that you are pinning at the dots and the notches, all right? So I'm going to move those out the way. And then I'm just going to pin just like this, making sure my dots are matching up. It's going to look weird, I know, but you want to make sure you're matching up your dots. Make sure you're, and you're gonna have this little peak right here. It's supposed to be like that. If you are wondering, you want to make sure you pin it at that dot, all right? Just like that. Make sure that it matches up, and you're going to have a little peak at the bottom too. It's okay, because you're gonna clip that off, all right? Just make sure you have number 5, you have that bottom edge, all right? So you're gonna pin the other side the same way. You're gonna make sure that you match up the notch right here, and pin at that dot. Make sure that both of those dots are matched up, and raw edges even for sure. You want to pin. It's okay that you have the peak, and then at the bottom you want to do the same thing, and you want to pin, all right? So now I'm using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew across both of your facing pieces. Once you do that, Here's the thing, because it doesn't have any interfacing, you have the option of serging them together, or you could serge them now and then stitch them together, or you could go ahead and fold them down and do kind of like a narrow hem. It's completely up to you, but I'm gonna serge my seams together and press them to one side. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my front facing attached to my back facing, I'm gonna show you what that looks like. Right sides together. I went ahead and finished off my seam allowance, right, with my serger. It looks like this. And then I pressed the seam allowance towards the back, which is pattern piece number 5 on both sides. After I did that, I went ahead and serged or finished off the bottom edge of my facing all the way down. This is what it looks like, all right? So next thing we're gonna do is we are gonna attach our facing to our dress. Now, before I do that, I'm gonna tell you, I went ahead and add in a label. Now, this is my daughter label because that's what she handed to me when I said, get a label out of the drawer. She decides to hand me her label. It's okay because she has tons of them. She has like 200 labels and so do I. So it's no big deal anyway, but it's mine. It's my dress, all right? So go ahead and grab your dress. And you want to be looking at the right side. So the right side is up. So what you're going to do is pin your facing onto your dress over the ties. So make sure your ties are out of the way. It's nice and pressed down for sure. And then with right sides together, so you want to make sure that you have the right side of your facing onto your dress. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the front, the center front, where my ties are, and I'm going to pin, all right? So I'm going to pin there. I'm going to pin in the other corner where my other ties are. I'm going to pin in the center, and then I'm just going to pin along the entire top portion of my dress, making sure that the raw edges are even. So go ahead and pin around your entire dress. Now making sure you match up the notches as well. So go ahead and do that now. Now, one thing I want to mention is you have a dot right here. Make sure that matches up with your side seam where you have that dart, all right? So make sure you match that up as well and continuously pin all the way along the back of your dress. So go ahead and finish pinning now. All right, so now that I have the facing pinned on, but I'm going to tell you a few things. I have it pinned on. Now, before you sew this together, a couple of things I want you to do. First of all, I want you to finish off your center back seam, okay? Because you're gonna fold it backwards, all right? So finish off your center back seam on both sides of your dress now, all right? Before you pin on your facing, all right? Now, another thing, your facing will not go all the way to the end, and it's supposed to do that, all right? And the reason why is because you're going to fold your center back or back seams, right? You're going to fold it onto itself where you have the dot, and it's going to create like a facing, okay? So it's supposed to be like that. So if your facing is not extending all the way out, it's supposed to be like that. It's fine, all right? Make sure that your dot match up with your side seams. Make sure your notches are matching up as well, all right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the center front using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the center front. So all the way down, all the way to the end where this pin is on my facing, back stitch at the end. I'm going to flip it over and then do the same thing in the opposite direction. All right. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I'm going to trim it down and I'm going to understitch. Even though it does not say this in the instructions, I want my facing to stay to the inside. So I will be understitching on my facing. So basically what I'm going to do is trim it down, press my seam allowance towards my facing, and then understitch and give it a good press. All right. So go ahead and do all of that now. All right, so now that I am back at the sewing machine, I'm gonna show you how you sew your facing and trim it down and everything, all right? So I already have my needle down, my presser foot down. I have it lined up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch. I'm starting at the center back, or I mean center front. I'm gonna sew 5/8 of an inch all the way to the end on this side. So go ahead and do that now. As I am inching up towards this corner, I'm just going to kind of pivot a little bit to make sure that I'm still lined up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to put my presser foot down. I'm going to make sure my straps are still straight and not crooked. And I'm going to sew again. Now I know you see this peak, but it's okay. I'm going to trim it off after I finish sewing. Now I'm starting to get to this edge right here. I'm going to lift my presser foot up, pivot it back to 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to sew again. Just make sure you're always lined up with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance when you're sewing. So I'm going to finish and go all the way to the end and back stitch at the end. Go ahead and do that now. Now that I'm approaching the end, I'm going to back stitch at the end. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So go ahead and do the other side now. All right, so now that I have my facing attached, now what you're going to do is you're going to turn the center back or back, and you have 2 dots. So you're just going to make sure that you pin at that dot, all right? Now, this is what you want to do. You don't want to pin it over your facing. You want to make sure your facing is on top of that portion, okay? So I'm going to unpin just a little bit. And what you want to do is make sure, I'm going to unpin just a little bit. So let me unpin it and I'm going to show you what you do next, all right? So go ahead, and if you already did this, you could unpin yours as well. All right, so I unpicked it just a little bit. You don't need to unpick it just a lot. So what I'm gonna do is make sure that my facing is just a little bit, not just barely touching, just like this, right? And I'm going to repin. Okay, you just want it touching. You do not want it you don't want it to where you're unable to fold your center back onto itself, okay? But you do want your facing kind of on top a little bit, per se, just like that. All right, so I'm gonna pin it right back in place. And I'm going to stitch all the way across. I'm going to do this on both sides. So let me show you what it looks like. You just want this center back piece to kind of touch the facing piece. And I'm going to stitch all the way across, still using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both ends. And then I'm going to trim the top, under stitch just the facing piece, not on this portion, and then press it under. All right, so go ahead and do all that now. All right, so we are done with the facing. I went ahead and tacked it down on the back portion for the facing, so the facing would not be flopping around when wearing it. All right, I also did some hand sewing at the while I was sitting down on the couch, actually, is what I did. All right, so what we're gonna do, we are going to move this off to the side. I'm gonna grab the instructions to show you where we are. So you have completed units 1 through 4, but I wanna show you kind of like where you are in the process. The only thing you have left to do is unit 5, the hem, the top stitching, and then you are all done. Now I'm gonna be adding a belt loop, but if you want to do the chain carriers like you see in step number 17, you can. All right. Now we are on unit number 5, the belt. So I'm not going to walk you through it like I did for the tie ends, but it's the same thing. what you're going to do, let me move the instructions out of the way because I'm not kind of reading it because I know how to do this one. But what you're going to do is right sides together. You're going to fold it in half. You have the dots. You're going to stitch from the bottom to the top all the way down and across using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trim it down and then give it a good press. All right. Now, once you do that, you're going to pin your belt to the back of your dress. So I'm going to grab my dress. All right, so this is the inside of my dress that I'm looking at right now. I'm going to go to one side, and then I have all the rest of it to the left of me. And then what I'm going to do, because this is the edge, what I'm going to do is just pin it right there, making sure that the dots meet up, okay? And then all you're gonna do is pin, and what they want you to do after you pin is basically just tack it down with some by hand, but I'm just gonna tack it down at the machine, all right? So go ahead and you can hand sew or you could machine baste it on at the dots, all right? So go ahead and baste your tie ends on or your belt on now. All right, so this is my apron dress. I'm going to kind of tell you what I did off camera so you can kind of finish up everything. So I have my tie belts on. I kind of hand stitched them and then I pinned them into place, all right? So the only thing left for you to have to do is your facing, your hem, your top stitching, and your belt carrier, all right? So let's talk about the hem first. So what I did was I went ahead and serged the bottom portion of my hem. It looks like this, all right? Now, my hem is 3 inches from the bottom because the hem allowance is 2 1/4 is great, but because mine is long, I went ahead and pressed up 3 inches. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and sew my hem in place here in a moment. But I wanted to do so many things instead of keep going back and forth to the sewing machine. So I went ahead, pressed that up at 3 inches because mine is long. I added 5 inches. So I'm going to press up 3, which means I actually only added 2 inches to the bottom once you account for the seam allowance. All right. So I'm going to stitch that in place. After I stitched my hem in place, what I also did was I went ahead and pressed the facing. So the back, the center back, I went ahead and pressed that all the way down. Now, mine is, I believe when I pressed it in, because I just basically pressed it in, I think it measures 2 1/4, if I'm correct. Let me get my ruler to tell you. I'm sorry, it's right at 2 inches. 2 1/4, I'm sorry, 2 1/4 inches, which is 2 1/4. So I pressed it all the way up 2 1/4 inches. This was already, you know, serged. Like I told you to serge your center back seam. That's what it looks like. All right. So then I just pinned on the right side because I'm going to basically make sure that I sew on the right side all the way up. All right. Now, after you do that to both sides, the only thing left for you to do is top stitch around the entire portion of your apron dress. So you're going to start at the bottom, top stitch. Now I'm going to top stitch at about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way up the back across the top and then end at one side. All right, for your top stitching. All right, so once you do that, the only thing left for you to do are your belt carriers. So I'm going to move my apron dress out the way for a second. Grab your belt loops if you created belt loops. All right, so if you created belt loops, go ahead and grab your belt loops. Basically, I create my own belt loops, and that's 6 inches across, 1 1/4. I'm sorry, 1 1/2 inch up and down. All right, so length by height. Now, what you're going to do if you decide that you want to do what I'm doing, what you're going to do is press it in half, just like this, open it out, and then press to the crease, just like this, all right? Once you press to the crease, you're going to press it in to where it's going to look like this, and then you're going to stitch it at the raw edge. Once you do that, you want to fold it in half and cut it in half. And you're going to attach, you're going to fold it in 1/4 of an inch on each side and attach it to your side seams. All right? And your side seams is where you have the dots, the darts, the long darts are your side seam. You can even try it on and see where your side seams are. You're just going to attach it. You can also make thread loops as well. That's completely up to you. Once you attach your belt carriers or your belt loops to your dress, go ahead, try it on. Make sure that you could tie it in the front with the ties, and then take some pictures, and you are all done with your apron dress. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this sew-along. This was one of the requested sew-alongs on the request line. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you make this dress, do not forget to tag me on Instagram at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. So I'll catch you in the next video. All right, so there you have it. That is the complete pattern review and sew-along. I hope you enjoyed. And since you made it this far, do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video. And as always, keep sewing.